That night, on a windy rooftop with champagne worth more than my first paycheck, my husband pointed to another woman and called her his new wife. Everyone stared, waiting for me to break. I just smiled, my hand gripping the clutch that held the old prenup he made me sign. They thought I was the one humiliated. But that was the night he triggered the legal bomb I'd spent years preparing. If you want to know how a replaced wife can turn the tables with an old prenup, this is my story. My name is Chloe Stewart. I am just shy of 40 years old, and tonight, my full-time job is being the perfect hostess. The air up here, on the rooftop of the Meridian Crown, is thin and sharp. It smells like money and exhaust, rising from the streets of Crown Harbor below. This glass and steel tower is where my husband, Logan Ward, likes to be seen. It reflects a sky polluted by the city's ambition. My ambition, too, I suppose. I am standing beside him, my smile practiced and my dress a deep, calculated navy. If you read the magazines, Logan is the self-made tech billionaire, the visionary who built Ward Nexus Capital from absolutely nothing. He adores that narrative. It's clean, shiny, aggressively American, but I was the one who balanced the books for the first 3 years. I know which nothing that narrative conveniently ignores. I know where the first few million in seed money really came from, the ones that truly started the engine. I know which regulations were casually bent, which partners were strategically erased from the company history as soon as they were no longer useful. Logan's fortune isn't self-made. It's just very, very well laundered. The MC, a local news anchor whose teeth are too white for prime time, hands the microphone to Logan. The crystal flute in my hand feels cold, heavy. The champagne inside it is a $300 a bottle bubble bath of self-congratulation. Logan taps the mic. That awful, amplified thump-thump sound echoes over the polite chatter. He lifts his glass. He beams. His voice is a carefully engineered instrument, calibrated for trust. "Thank you all for coming," he says. "Tonight isn't just about giving back to this great city. It's about a new beginning. A new beginning." The phrase hangs in the air. Wrong. It feels oily. It doesn't fit the script we rehearsed, the one I helped him polish just last night. A chill, colder than the October wind, runs up my spine and settles in my neck. I glance at him, but he's not looking at me. He's looking just past the spotlight, into the velvet shadows by the stage. "And in the spirit of new beginnings," Logan continues, his voice thickening with a manufactured emotion that makes my stomach clench, "I want to share a very personal one." He reaches out his hand, not to me, but into those shadows. A woman steps forward. She is young, very young, maybe 25. Her dress is white, a stark, aggressive, bridal white that sucks all the light. Her face is optimized by fillers and filters, a perfect mask of modern beauty. I recognize her instantly. Naomi Hart, a lifestyle vlogger, an influencer whose entire brand is built on authenticity and sponsored wellness products. The flashbulbs, which had been polite and respectful, now erupt. They pop, 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 like a firing squad. The sound is deafening. Logan pulls her close, his arm possessive and firm around her tiny, gym-honed waist. He looks directly at the crowd, at the cameras, and then, finally, at me. "I'd like you all to meet Naomi," he projects, his voice booming with pride. "My new wife." Silence. Not just quiet, but a vacuum. The entire rooftop, 300 of Crown Harbor's elite, sucks in its breath at the same time. The dull thump of the ambient house music is the only sound, a heartbeat for a dead room. Then, the whispers. A sibilant hiss that spreads through the crowd like a gas leak. I see the phones rising, a forest of little glass rectangles, not just the designated press photographers, but the guests, Mrs. Bancroft, the mayor's wife, whose charity I just chaired, Arthur Hayes, the hedge fund manager who ate brisket in my dining room just last Tuesday, patting my arm and calling me the best wife in this city. They are all angling for the shot. They are capturing the content, the viral moment, The perfect, brutal triangle Logan, the triumphant, vital husband, Naomi, the blushing, upgraded replacement, and me, Chloe Stewart, the public surplus, the discarded wife. My body does a strange, distant thing. It detaches. I feel like I'm floating near the steel rafters, watching the scene below as if it were a poorly written television show. My ears fill with a high-pitched ringing, a digital whine that blocks out the noise. But my vision becomes impossibly sharp, almost painful. I see everything in high definition. I see the pity on the faces of the junior associates. I see the thinly veiled, reptilian triumph on the faces of the women who always envied my house, my car, my husband. They are drinking this in. They are savoring my humiliation. They are waiting for the tears. They are waiting for the scream, the satisfying, messy crack as the perfect hostess finally shatters. I don't give it to them. The woman they are watching, the wife in the navy blue couture gown I personally selected for its understated power, does not crumble. I feel my hand move, not to wipe a tear I will not shed, but to smooth the silk over my hip. I take one step forward, then another. I am walking towards them, towards the center of the storm. The whispers die instantly. The crowd is confused. This is not in their script. I stop just before I reach the low stage. I lift my glass, the champagne barely trembling. I smile. It's the same smile I use when finalizing a catering menu or firing a gardener. "Congratulations, Logan," I say, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden, absolute quiet. "You always did love a dramatic reveal." Logan looks stunned. His face, usually so controlled, flickers with rage. This deviation wasn't planned. Naomi, however, is a professional. She mistakes my composure for a civilized, European-style agreement. She steps forward, breaking Logan's grip, and extends a perfectly manicured hand, her diamond bracelet a new one. I note flashing under the lights. "Chloe," she coos, her voice exactly like her filtered videos, all breathy and earnest. "I'm so glad we can finally be open about this. I truly hope we can handle this with grace." She is offering me a handshake for the cameras, a performance of female solidarity. I take her hand. Her skin is soft, plumped with hydration, and unused. My own hand, however, is gripping a very thin, folded sheaf of papers I had tucked inside my simple, elegant clutch. As our palms meet, I slide the papers into her grasp. It's a smooth transfer. A sleight of hand I didn't know I possessed, hidden by the angle of our bodies and the blinding flashbulbs. She frowns, a tiny wrinkle appearing between her perfect brows. This isn't part of her influencer script. I lean in close, my smile still locked in place, my lips almost brushing her ear. The cameras are still flashing. "Welcome to the family," I whisper, my voice a blade wrapped in velvet. "He made me sign that when we got married. You should read it tonight, before you get too comfortable. Pay close attention to Section 4, Subsection B, the part about infidelity and asset forfeiture." I pull back, but I keep holding her gaze. Her eyes, wide and blue, finally register something other than triumph. They register fear. "Don't you dare pity me, please. You're watching this, thinking I'm the victim, the poor, aging wife tossed aside. But you don't understand. That piece of paper in her hand isn't just a document. It's a key to understand the bomb that just went off tonight. You have to know why I held that pen, why I signed my name all those years ago, and why I never, ever let it go. I turn from them. I don't run. I don't stalk off. I walk back to my original spot by the railing, as if I'm just another guest enjoying the view, perhaps waiting for a fresh drink. The photographers scramble, their lenses panning wildly, trying to get all three of us in the frame. Logan, frozen in a mask of pure rage. Naomi, looking down at the folded papers in her hand, her mask of grace finally cracking into ugly confusion. And me, in the resulting photographs that will plaster every gossip site and financial blog by morning, They will capture the moment. But only one of us is looking straight down the barrel of the lens. Only one of us looks like they just won. My eyes are no longer the eyes of the woman who walked in tonight. They are not the eyes of the weak. They are the eyes of the one holding the detonation codes. That cold rooftop in Crown Harbor is 1,000,000 miles and a lifetime away from Maple Ridge. Maple Ridge isn't a place you aim for. It's a place you're from. It's a small, working-class town pressed flat by humidity in the summer and gray, wet snow in the winter. The biggest employers were the paper mill, which smelled like sulfur and boiled cabbage, and the regional hospital. My family lived in a cramped bungalow on a street where every house had a car on blocks in the driveway and a deep, abiding hope for one big break. Usually, this meant a lucky scratch ticket or a lawsuit. Our house was more cramped than most because it included my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin. Harper Lane. Harper. Even her name sounded like something from a magazine. She was my exact age, but we were built from different materials. Harper was all light and air, with natural blonde hair that fell in perfect waves and a laugh that made people want to give her things. She was, as everyone in our family agreed from the moment she was born, the universe's favorite. She was our dynasty, our lottery ticket, our designated future. I was the other one, the quiet one, the one with the plain brown hair, the one who was good at math. I was Chloe, the one who can help you with your homework. My parents and my aunt and uncle operated as a stressed, unified committee dedicated to the Harper Project. When new school clothes were bought, Harper got the Guess jeans and the Benetton sweaters. I got whatever was durable and on sale at Sears. When Harper wanted to join the cheerleading squad, the money for the uniform and the summer camps just appeared, even if it meant the electricity bill was a week late. When I asked about joining the debate team, which cost almost nothing, my mother sighed and said, "Chloe, honey, we just don't have the emotional energy for more running around right now." I wasn't mistreated. I was just omitted. My greatest virtue, repeated constantly by all the adults, was that I was no trouble. "Chloe's so good," my mother would tell her friends over weak coffee. "She never asks for anything." They said it with such pride, as if they had successfully trained a pet not to beg at the table. They didn't understand that being no trouble is a form of erosion. It's a slow, steady sanding down of your own importance until you start to believe you don't, or shouldn't, exist. You learn to take up less space, to muffle your own needs. The epicenter of my education was the dinner table. Our dinners were loud, tense affairs, smelling of fried bologna and anxiety. The adults didn't talk about politics or the news. They talked about money, the lack of it, the terror of it, and the strategies for getting it. The primary strategy was always Harper. "I saw that Johnson boy's father driving a new Lincoln," my uncle would say, chewing. "His family owns the biggest plumbing supply in 3 counties. Harper, didn't that boy look at you in church?" "He's gross," Harper would whine, tossing her perfect hair. "Gross doesn't matter, sweetie," my aunt would coo, passing the potatoes. "Secure is what matters. You can learn to love secure." They discussed her future marriage like a corporate merger. It was a financial plan. Who had land? Who had a family business? Who was set up? In my house, love wasn't a feeling. It was collateral. It was the asset you traded when you had nothing else of value. And I sat there, night after night, invisible and silent, learning a fundamental truth. People, especially your own family, will happily sell you out and call it looking out for you. My only escape was the Maple Ridge Public Library. It was quiet, it was warm, and it smelled like old paper and floor wax. I found my refuge in the aisles. I didn't just read novels, I read everything. I started with business biographies, trying to figure out how people got money. Then I found the legal section. I pulled out dusty textbooks on contract law, on corporate structures, on wills and estates. I became obsessed. I'd sit for hours, tracing the dense, impenetrable language with my finger. I began to see the world as a series of agreements, visible and invisible. I saw that the words on a page, the right words, in the right order, were a kind of armor. They were the rules, The people who got sold out were the ones who didn't know the rules. I vowed I would never, ever be the person in the room who didn't know the rules. I would never again sign something I didn't understand, even if it was just a permission slip. There was one person who saw me. My grandmother, Eleanor. She was my mother's mother, a tough, quiet woman who smoked unfiltered cigarettes on the porch and read the stock market ticker in the newspaper. She didn't coo over Harper. She'd watch me reading on the floor and just nod. "You're different, Chloe," she told me one afternoon, the smoke from her cigarette curling in the humid air. We were the only two on the porch. This family, they're all looking for a rescue. They want to be saved. She tapped her ash into a coffee can. "One of our girls won't sell herself for money, but she'll know how to make money serve her. That'll be you, Bird. Don't you let them make you small." When she died suddenly of an aneurysm 6 months later, the family was devastated for a week. Then they were just annoyed when they found out her small life insurance policy didn't pay out enough to cover the new roof. But it wasn't for them. She had left me a small but protected educational savings account, just a few $1,000s. It wasn't enough for a 4-year university, but it was enough for community college and a bus ticket out. It was a key. High school only amplified the divide. Harper started dating a boy from the good side of the tracks, the one with the golf courses. He drove a convertible and bought her a Coach bag, which she'd leave on the kitchen counter like a trophy. She'd talk loudly on the phone about parties I wasn't invited to, and weekends at his family's lake house. I got a job. I became a barista at the Daily Grind, the only decent coffee shop in town. It was the place where the town's few professionals, the lawyers, the doctors, the small business owners came for their morning caffeine. I served them lattes and muffins, and I listened. I became a ghost, wiping down counters just close enough to hear them. They didn't talk about marrying for money. They talked about IRAs. They complained about escrow. They argued over partnership agreements and non-compete clauses. I soaked it all up. I learned their language, this vocabulary of power that was completely foreign in my own home. I'd go home smelling like burnt coffee and scribble down terms I didn't understand: fiduciary duty, vesting schedule, liability, and look them up later at the library. The end came during a massive family fight over a payday loan my father had taken out. The shouting was so loud I could hear it from the sidewalk. When I walked in, my father, his face purple with rage and shame, was slumped at the kitchen table. "I don't know what to do," he was whispering to my mother. There's nothing left." My mother, trying to comfort him, gestured toward me, standing frozen in the doorway. "It's okay, honey. We still have Harper. And Chloe. Well, Chloe's smart. She'll get a good, steady job at the hospital. Maybe in billing." My father didn't even look at me. He just shook his head, a gesture of pure, exhausted defeat. "She'll never earn anything big," he said. "Not to me, but about me. She's not like Harper. Don't put your hopes there." He didn't mean it to be cruel. It was just a fact, like saying the sky was gray. I was not the asset. I was the liability, the one who was no trouble, but also no hope. That sentence settled into my bones. It became the engine. 2 months later, at 18, I cashed out half of Eleanor's bond. I packed one suitcase and a duffel bag full of library books I'd forgotten to return. I walked to the Greyhound station at 5 in the morning. As the bus pulled away, the diesel fumes stinging my nose, I watched Maple Ridge shrink in the dirty rear window. We passed the sign, the green one with the peeling white paint. "You're now leaving Maple Ridge. Come back soon." I promised myself I never would. I leaned my head against the vibrating glass and made a different vow. Someday, someone will have to read my name in a contract, whether they like it or not. Crown Harbor was the antidote to Maple Ridge. Where Maple Ridge was weathered wood and rust, Crown Harbor was plate glass and blue-tinted steel. It was a city of sharp angles and relentless ambition. I arrived with one suitcase, my duffel bag of borrowed library books, and the few $1,000s from Grandma Eleanor. It wasn't enough for an Ivy League education. I didn't go to Yale or Harvard. I went to Crown Harbor City University, a concrete commuter school where everyone worked at least one job and smelled faintly of the bus. I lived in a cramped third-floor walk-up with two other girls, and I worked 30 hours a week waiting tables at a diner that served lawyers on their lunch break. I double majored in finance and business law, and I graduated at the top of my class, in Crown Harbor. That and about $5 would get you a cup of coffee. After sending out over 100 resumes, I got a call. Kingsley Rowe, LLP. They weren't the top-tier, white shoe firm that recruited exclusively from the Ivy Leagues, but they were a solid, respectable, mid-level power. Their corporate law division was known for being aggressive and thorough. My cubicle was on the 27th floor, a small gray box with a beige phone and a view of a neighboring building's air conditioning unit. The carpet smelled like industrial cleaner and old paper. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever been. I was assigned as a paralegal to Avery Hale. Avery was a senior associate, a woman in her mid-40s with razor-sharp dark hair, suits that cost more than my semester's tuition, and an expression of permanent, controlled impatience. The other paralegals whispered that she ate new hires for breakfast. She didn't believe in small talk. She believed in billable hours. On my first day, she dropped a blue-bound document on my desk. It was a 300-page acquisition agreement, and it landed with a heavy, final thud. "Redline this for conflicts and liability exposure by 5 o'clock, she said, not even looking at me. And Chloe, I don't mean run a spell check. I mean read it. Find the traps. I read it 3 times. My lunch sat uneaten on my desk. I found 3 major issues. 2 were obvious conflicts of interest with other clients. The third was a snake, buried deep in an appendix. It was a single sentence that cross-referenced a definition in another section, effectively neutralizing the entire liability cap we were trying to impose. At 4:50 p.m., I placed the red-line document, with my neatly typed notes, on her desk. She scanned my notes. Her expression didn't change. She just grunted. "You missed the ambiguity in the force majeure clause, but you found the appendix trap. Not terrible." From Avery Hale. Not terrible was a declaration of love. Avery became my real education. She wasn't warm, she wasn't nurturing, but she was honest. She taught me to read a contract not as a document, but as a detective story. "Law isn't about what's right, Chloe," she'd say, sipping her bitter black coffee. "It's about what's written. The person who controls the language controls the outcome." I learned to see the intent behind the jargon. Reasonable best efforts meant we'll send 2 emails and give up. Notwithstanding the foregoing was the trapdoor phrase that meant, everything I just promised you in the last paragraph is a lie. A missing comma wasn't a typo. It was a $1 million loophole. I was back in the Maple Ridge Library. Only now the stakes were real. I was quiet, I was diligent, and I was terrified of making a mistake. About a year into my job, the firm landed a whale, Logan Ward. His name was everywhere. Ward Nexus Capital. He was the new face of fintech, the charismatic, self-made billionaire who was disrupting everything. The partners were ecstatic. He was assigned to Mr. Kingsley himself, but the actual work, the grunt work, filtered down. The file landed on my desk from Avery. "Kingsley's new golden boy is getting married," she said, tossing the manila folder. "Some socialite. He wants the ironclad special, maximum protection for him, minimum for her. He wants to be firewalled. Draft the template based on his asset list." It was the first prenup I'd ever worked on, for a week. I lived inside Logan Ward's finances, and I drafted the most brutal, one-sided document I could imagine. It was an education in strategic cruelty. I learned how the truly wealthy plant their clauses, how they define marital property as only things acquired jointly in a specific bank account, leaving everything else as separate, how they cap alimony and tie it to confidentiality clauses so severe that if she ever spoke about the marriage, she'd owe him money. I was building a paper cage, and I felt a cold, sick thrill. This was the language of power my family never knew existed. I sent the draft up the chain to Avery, who sent it to Kingsley. 2 weeks later, the office gossip mill, which ran on whispers and instant messages, was on fire. The wedding was off. Logan Ward had been dumped. The story, which made all the local gossip columns, was that the fiancé had been caught with some indie rock musician. Avery and I were the only ones who knew the likely truth. Her lawyer probably read the draft, Avery muttered, stirring her coffee. Good for her. She wasn't as stupid as he wanted her to be. It was a lesson I filed away. People always think they're the smartest person in the room, right until they meet the other person's lawyer. Logan didn't leave the firm. On the contrary, after the humiliation of the breakup, he seemed to throw himself into his work. He started coming to the office constantly, not just for Kingsley, but for Avery's team. He was acquiring smaller companies, diversifying, investing, and I was the paralegal in the room for all of it, sitting in the corner, typing notes, trying to be invisible. He'd nod at me. Chloe? But he was talking to Avery. The moment it all changed was a Tuesday afternoon in July. We were in the big conference room, the one with the view of the harbor. Logan was excited, practically vibrating, about investing in a new biotech startup. He was ready to sign the Series B funding agreement. It looks standard, Logan, Avery said, flipping through the pages. Aggressive valuation, but the terms are standard. I stopped typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. To speak up was to risk my job, but the mistake was, it was just so big. Ms. Hale. My voice was barely a squeak. Avery looked up, her eyes sharp with annoyance. Logan turned, his gaze passing over me, annoyed at the interruption. What is it, Chloe? I cleared my throat. Section 5.2, the drag-along rights. They're tied to the common stockholders, not the preferred. I swallowed, my mouth dry. And the anti-dilution clause in Section 6 doesn't cover a downstream merger. If this company gets acquired by a larger entity for stock instead of cash, his entire preferred position could be diluted to almost nothing. They'd be able to force him to sell at their price, and he'd have no recourse. The room was completely silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Avery stared at the page. She read it, then read it again. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. Logan looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time, not as furniture, but as a person. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially by a paralegal. Is she right, Avery? He asked, his voice flat. Avery closed the document with a soft slap. Yes, she is. A very expensive catch. Chloe, good work. She turned back to Logan. We send this back to their counsel. Tell them we redraft 5 and 6, or there's no deal. After that meeting, Logan Ward knew my name. He started inviting Avery to lunch, the expensive places, the ones with white tablecloths and sommeliers. And bring Chloe, he'd add, as an afterthought. I want her eyes on this. So I'd go, sitting silently in my $20 blazer from a discount store, surrounded by men in $5,000 suits. I'd order the cheapest thing on the menu and just listen. But then a shift happened. After a few of these lunches, Logan would be outlining a new deal, looking at Avery, and then, slowly, his eyes would slide. To me. What do you think? Chloe? He'd ask, cutting right past his lawyer. Where's the trap? What's the risk I'm not seeing? And I would tell him, quietly. The indemnity clause is uncapped, Mr. Ward, or the exit provisions are vague. They don't define cause for a buyout. He was fascinated. I was the opposite of everyone in his life. I wasn't a sycophant. I wasn't trying to sell him anything or flatter him. I was just cautious. I was the girl from Maple Ridge who knew what it felt like to have nothing. So I was clinically terrified of losing anything. He mistook my deep-seated anxiety for brilliant legal insight. He began to trust my caution more than his partner's optimism. This, I knew, was power. He didn't see me as a threat. He saw me as a shield. It was 6 months after the biotech meeting. November. A cold, miserable rain was lashing the windows of the 27th floor. I'd stayed late. Of course. My cheap umbrella had inverted and broken that morning. I was standing under the granite awning of our building, trying to summon the courage for a soaking wet run to the bus stop. A black town car, sleek and silent as a shark, slid to the curb, the tinted rear window lowered. It was Logan. "Chloe, you're going to drown out here." I felt my face flush. "I'm fine, Mr. Ward, just waiting for the bus." "Don't be ridiculous," he said. He opened his door and got out of the car. Stepping into the downpour, he opened a huge, black, expensive-looking umbrella and walked over to me, holding it over my head. He was standing close. He smelled like expensive wool, citrus, and ozone from the rain. "Get in," he said, his voice low, not the booming CEO voice I was used to. "I'll take you home." I hesitated. It was unprofessional. Avery would kill me. "I'm not taking no for an answer," he said, smiling, and guided me into the car. The leather seats were impossibly soft, and it was warm. As the car pulled silently into traffic, he was quiet for a few blocks. Then he turned to me, his face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "You know," he said, "you make me feel safer than any lawyer I've ever hired." I just looked at him, my heart doing that same stupid hammering it did in the conference room. He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that wasn't for a partner or a client. "We should talk more, Chloe, and I don't just mean about contracts." The courtship was 6 months of high-altitude living, a dizzying ascent from conference rooms to his penthouse, from mitigating risk to planning a future. Logan wasn't like anyone I had ever known. He was decisive, powerful, and he focused on me with the same laser intensity he applied to a hostile takeover. He proposed on a Tuesday, not a holiday. It was private, in his penthouse, with the lights of Crown Harbor spread out below us like a carpet of diamonds. There was no flash mob, no skywriting, just him, on one knee, and a ring with a diamond so large and clear it looked like captured water. I said yes. I was in love, or at least, I was in love with the idea of being this new person, the one who was chosen so definitively. The next morning, over coffee served by his housekeeper, the other shoe dropped. He was smiling, holding my hand, the new diamond flashing. "Chloe," he said, his voice casual, "obviously, I'm going to have my lawyers draft a prenuptial agreement. It's just standard practice, protects us both. You understand, right? You, of all people. Get the paperwork." I didn't flinch. The girl from Maple Ridge, the one who watched her family treat marriage like a merger, wasn't shocked. The paralegal from Kingsley Row, the one who had drafted that brutal, one-sided cage for his last fiancée, was expecting it. "Of course," I said, my voice just as level as his. "I'd be surprised if you didn't." He looked relieved. "Great. My guys will send a draft to, well, wherever you want." "Send it to Avery Hale," I said. "But Logan, I want one thing clear. I'm not signing a contract for indentured servitude. It needs to be transparent, and it needs to be fair. I'm not one of your shell companies." I met Avery for a secret coffee, far from the office. I had already given my 2 weeks' notice at Kingsley Row. She looked at me over the rim of her ceramic mug, her expression unreadable. "So, you're doing it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am. The draft is on its way to you." Avery leaned forward. "Chloe, listen to me. You are way out of your depth. You're smart. But he's in a different league. He's not just a client anymore. You're playing on his turf, by his rules. This document, if you sign this, you make sure you have a weapon of your own tucked inside it, because the day he decides he's done with you, this is the only thing that will matter. Don't you dare get sentimental. Read it like he's your worst enemy." The draft that arrived was, just as I'd expected, a masterpiece of legal protection for him. It was the ironclad special I had once worked on, but polished. My allowance was capped. Any appreciation on his existing assets, Ward Nexus Capital, his real estate portfolio, His offshore accounts was defined as his separate property, period. Any assets acquired during the marriage were only considered marital if purchased through a specific joint account he controlled. It was designed to keep me a guest in my own life, a highly paid employee with the title of wife. I went back to him, not with tears, but with a red-lined document. "This isn't going to work, Logan." He was annoyed. He was not used to being challenged, especially by me, the quiet paralegal he'd discovered. "Chloe, this is standard. My lawyers insist." "Your lawyers work for you," I cut in, my voice shaking slightly, but I held his gaze. "This clause, it means I could advise you on a deal that makes you $100 million, and I wouldn't be entitled to a single cent of it. This one, it limits any settlement so low that it's frankly insulting. I'm not Harper Lane's mother, Logan, looking for a man to take care of me. I'm leaving my career to build a life with you, and I will not be the only one in this partnership who is fully exposed." We fought. We negotiated for 2 solid weeks. His lawyer sent drafts. Avery sent them back. Bleeding red ink. Logan was furious, frustrated, and, in a strange, predatory way, I think he was excited. He saw the girl who spotted the anti-dilution trap. He saw someone who wasn't intimidated by his power. He saw, for the first time, a true partner in battle, even if the battle was against him. Finally, he caved, but only on what he considered theoretical points. The final, executed version, the one we both signed in a sterile conference room with 2 sets of lawyers present, had 3 critical, negotiable clauses that I had fought for. First, any income or assets derived from my own labor or investments, earned after the date of the marriage, would remain my separate and sole property. Second, any investments held in an account under my individual name were mine, untouchable, regardless of whether the initial funds came from a gift or allowance. And third, the one Avery called the time bomb. It was my masterpiece. Section 4, subsection B. If Logan engaged in infidelity, and if a divorce was filed within 10 years of the marriage date, he would be obligated to pay a single, fixed settlement, a very, very large one, plus 20% of the appreciated value of Ward Nexus Capital's primary investment fund. Logan signed it. He laughed as he did. That big, booming CEO laugh. "You're an expensive date, Chloe Stewart," he said. To him, it was a rounding error, the cost of doing business, the price he paid to marry the one woman who wasn't a yes woman or a predictable, vapid gold digger. The infidelity clause was meaningless. Why would he ever cheat on me? He'd just been humiliated by his last fiancé for that very thing. To me, it wasn't a prize. It was a life raft. It was the only way I could justify leaving the safety of my gray cubicle and stepping into his world. It was the key from Grandma Eleanor, remade in steel. The wedding was the opposite of our proposal. It was a public performance, held at the Silver Dunes Resort, a place so exclusive you couldn't even find it on a map. There were 500 guests, an orchestra, and enough flowers to fill a forest. I wore a custom gown. My family, flown in first class, looked stunned, like they'd won the lottery they were always dreaming about. My father cried. Harper, my bridesmaid, looked at me with a new, strange respect. I was no longer the invisible one. I was the asset. I left Kingsley Row. My life became golden. I became an unofficial advisor to Logan, sitting in on board meetings, not as a lawyer, but as his secret weapon, his gut check. "You don't need to work, darling," Logan would say, signing off on a black Amex card with my name on it. "Just enjoy yourself. Go to the spa, buy the art, redecorate the house." And I did. I went to the lunches. I chaired the charity balls. I bought the clothes. But the girl from Maple Ridge never, ever trusts the money will last. The barista who listened to lawyers talk about their portfolios didn't just spend the allowance he gave me. I opened a private brokerage account, under my name only. As per our agreement, I'd take a portion of the household and allowance money, 10% here, 20% there, and I'd invest. I didn't buy blue-chip stocks. I bought what I knew, I'd read the term sheets of small, hungry startups that Logan's firm dismissed as peanuts. I'd find the ones with the loopholes he'd miss, the ones with the solid fundamentals. I'd send the paperwork to Avery, who was now a partner, for a friendly read. "This one's solid," she'd email back. "This one's trash." I poured my secret money into those peanuts, a small biotech firm, a software-as-a-service platform, a company specializing in data encryption. Most of them did nothing, but two of them, after 3 or 4 years, exploded. My small, secret investments, made with what Logan considered his pocket change, were quietly ballooning in value, completely separate from his empire. The first 5 years were a blur of golden rituals: first-class flights to London and Tokyo, weekends at our massive, glass and cedar cabin in the mountains. We were the power couple of Crown Harbor. I was Mrs. Logan Ward, and through it all, I kept the habits of the paralegal. I kept meticulous records, every wire transfer, every investment, every email from Logan authorizing a gift to my account. I kept a ledger. One night, soon after we moved into the penthouse, I took the original, wet ink copy of our prenuptial agreement, the one with his confident, sprawling signature and my own neat, careful one. I didn't frame it. I didn't hide it. I walked into my home office, a room he rarely entered, and placed it in the back of my personal, fireproof safe, behind my own investment statements and my grandmother's old photograph. As I closed the heavy steel door and spun the dial, I felt a wave of security. I thought I was just locking away my future, my protection. I didn't know that what I had really just done was sign the script, load the weapon, and set the timer on the only revenge that would ever matter. The cracks in a glass mansion don't appear suddenly. They start as hairline fractures, tiny stresses in the foundation that you don't notice until a cold draft hits you at just the right angle. By year 7, Ward Nexus Capital was no longer just a company. It was an empire, and Logan was no longer a husband. He was an emperor. His schedule, once a shared Google Calendar, became a fortress guarded by a team of executive assistants. The investor meetings became investor calls, plural, spanning time zones, held on his private jet. The $100,000 deals I used to review became $100 million contracts I was no longer allowed to see. Our dinners for 2, once a sacred ritual, became dinners for 1. I'd sit at our vast, 12-person dining table, a slab of polished Italian marble that felt as cold as a morgue table. The private chef would serve me perfectly seared scallops, and I would eat them in total silence, staring at the empty high-backed chair where Logan was supposed to be. His absence was a physical presence, a cold, heavy void. I started to learn about my own husband's life the way the public did through the media. I'd see a headline on a financial blog: "Logan Ward stuns at Dubai FinTech Summit." He had told me he was in Chicago for a boring internal audit. Then came the social feeds, the tagged photos on Instagram from events he'd forgotten to mention. Logan, surrounded by a sea of beautiful, ambitious faces, actresses, models, startup founders young enough to be my intern, all of them looking at him with that same hungry, predatory light in their eyes. He was the sun, and they were all desperate for a sliver of his warmth. When he was home, the warmth I'd fallen for was gone. It had been replaced by a cool, efficient, brand management style. He stopped asking my opinion and started giving directives. "We have the Metropolis Art Gala on Friday," he'd say, not looking up from his phone. "I need you to wear the silver gray gown, the one we bought in Paris." I was thinking the blue. "No," he said, his voice flat. "Not the blue. It's too loud. We need dignified right now. We need to project stability." He wasn't my partner anymore. I was his asset. My job was to be the quiet, tasteful, supportive wife, a stable backdrop for his volatile genius. The girl who redlined his contracts was now just the woman who wore the right dress and didn't cause trouble. I was back in Maple Ridge, being praised for being no trouble. One night, I was walking to our bedroom and past his home office. The heavy oak door was open just a crack. I heard his voice, but it wasn't the confident, booming CEO voice he used for the public. It was strained. It was the voice of my father arguing about a payday loan. He was on a speakerphone, arguing with his CFO. Mark. What do you mean the leverage is too high? Mark, Logan snapped, his voice a low growl. You told me the Singapore deal would cover the exposure from the quarterly losses. The Singapore deal hasn't closed, Logan, and the feds are sniffing around that whole asset class. The cash flow it's tight, tighter than it's ever been. If we don't land this next round of funding, we are in serious trouble. I froze, my hand on the wall. High risk, tight cash flow, serious trouble. Ward Nexus Capital, the unsinkable financial titan, was juggling. Logan's response to this pressure wasn't to confide in me. His old secret weapon, it was to double down on public relations. He needed a distraction, a narrative of benevolence. Chloe, he announced a few days later, tossing a brochure onto the marble kitchen island. I need you to take over the Crown Harbor Children's Fund. They need a new chair for their annual benefit. You'll be the face of it. I looked at the brochure. It was a massive undertaking. Logan, I don't know if I have the... You'll do it, he said, cutting me off. It's a good look for the family. It's good for the brand. It's good for you to have a hobby. A hobby. The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. When I tried to ask him about what I'd heard, he shut me down instantly. Logan, I said, as calmly as I could. I was worried. I heard you and Mark. Is the company okay? He gave me a look of pure, cold pity. Chloe, don't worry your pretty head about the business. That's my world. You just focus on the charity. Make it a success. He patted my head. It was a gesture one gives to a well-behaved dog, and so I dove into the charity. It was there, at a sterile planning meeting in a borrowed boardroom, that I first met Naomi Hart. She was brought in by the foundation's PR team as a media engagement consultant. She was in her mid-20s, vibrant, and spoke in a rapid-fire blend of corporate buzzwords and therapy speak. We need to realign the brand's core narrative, she said, her eyes flashing. We need to create a donation funnel that feels authentic and story-driven. This can't just be a gala. It has to be content, epic content. To me, she was fawning, almost pathologically reverent. Oh my God, Mrs. Ward, she gushed, gripping my hand. It is such an honor. Seriously, your marriage, you and Mr. Ward are, like, total goals. I follow your lives, and it's everything. It was too much. The admiration was a thick, sticky, synthetic syrup. Logan made a rare appearance at one of our final planning meetings, sweeping in to show support. I watched Naomi. The bubbly, energetic mask was still in place, but when she looked at him, her eyes changed. The fawning awe was gone. It was replaced by something sharp, appraising, and intensely hungry. It wasn't the look of a starstruck consultant. It was the look of a predator identifying the most valuable target in the room. That night, I tried to voice my unease. We were getting ready for bed. The first time we'd been in the same room. Just us, in what felt like weeks. That Naomi girl, the influencer, I said, applying moisturizer, my back to him. The way she looks at you, it's a little unprofessional. Don't you think? Logan laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Paranoid. Chloe. She's 25 years old. Her job is to be impressed by people like me, who wouldn't want to be photographed with me. Don't be sensitive. It's not an attractive look on you. Paranoid. Sensitive. The words were small. Calculated dismissals. Designed to make me doubt my own observations. The paranoia, as he called it, didn't go away. It settled in. A few nights later, around 3 a.m, I was wide awake. He was asleep beside me, a heavy, snoring stranger. I felt a cold dread, the same dread I used to feel in Maple Ridge when the bills were on the table. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office. I sat in the dark, the city lights painting patterns on the floor. I opened my laptop and navigated to the secure portal for our personal investment accounts, the ones I used to help him track, the ones that held the bulk of his non-company assets. I typed in the password. Access denied. My blood ran cold. I typed it again, carefully. Access denied. I tried our anniversary, the dog's name, his mother's birthday. Your account has been locked due to multiple failed attempts. This was not a forgotten dinner. This was a firewall. He had locked me out. I waited until morning. I confronted him as he was sipping his green smoothie, scrolling through his iPad. I kept my voice perfectly level, the way Avery had taught me. Logan, I was trying to review the quarterly statements for the brokerage accounts. The password isn't working. He didn't look up. Oh, right. I had it do a full security sweep, changed all the high-level passwords, new protocols, a beat of silence. You didn't give me the new one. He finally lowered the iPad and looked at me. His eyes were not angry, not guilty. They were just empty. He gave a small, condescending chuckle. A guy needs to have some privacy, doesn't he? Don't worry your pretty head about it. Chloe, I've got it handled. I walked out of the kitchen, got in my car, and drove to the shabbiest bar near Avery's office. It was 10:30 in the morning. I ordered a black coffee and waited. When she walked in, she didn't look surprised to see me. I laid it all out. The isolation, the brand management dress codes, the overheard call with the CFO, the new hobby chairing the charity, Naomi, the condescension, and finally, the locked accounts. Avery listened, her expression as hard as granite. She ordered a whiskey, neat, even though it wasn't even noon. So, she said, her voice a low rasp, he's not just distancing himself, he's building a narrative. He's making you the paranoid, sensitive, clueless wife who spends his money on hobbies. So when things go bad, you're already discredited. What do I do? Avery? She took a sip of her whiskey. First, you stop being panicked. Panic is what he wants. Panic makes you sloppy. Remember this, Chloe, and remember it well. When a man starts changing his passwords, you make damn sure you still have the real keys, and the real keys are always the paperwork. She leaned in, her eyes boring into mine. You still have access to the main house server, right? The email archives from before he got paranoid, your joint tax returns, the deed to this place. I nodded. Yes, he's locked me out of the money, not the household. Good. He's arrogant. He's sloppy. Go home. Chloe, go home and back up everything. Every email he ever sent you. Every financial statement you can still get your hands on. Every joint tax return for the last 7 years. Copy it all. Get a hard drive. And then get another one and mail it to me. He's not just building a wall. He's building a case against you. It's time you started building yours. That night, I sat alone in my glass-walled office, high above the city. The penthouse was silent. I plugged a new 2-terabyte external hard drive into the server hub. A small blue light blinked on. A window popped up on my screen, copying files. 4. 218 items. I watched the green progress bar slowly crawl across the screen, and I understood, with chilling clarity, the truly dangerous combination I was facing. My marriage was failing. His company was failing. And Logan Ward was not the kind of man who would ever, under any circumstances, take the fall alone. The gala at the Meridian Crown was Logan's idea of a reset. 2 weeks prior, he had called a formal meeting in our penthouse dining room. He stood at the head of the 12-foot marble table, not as my husband, but as my CEO. The press has been unkind, he said, pacing. His voice was clipped. These rumors about cash flow are tiresome. This gala, he tapped the glossy brochure on the table, is not just a charity event anymore. It's a relaunch. It's the public face of Act 2 for Ward Nexus Capital. He finally stopped pacing and looked at me. His eyes were flat, devoid of the warmth I once knew. I need you there. I need you looking radiant. Chloe, beautiful, silent, and radiant. We need to project unbreakable unity. Do you understand? I understood. I was no longer a partner. I was a prop, the human interest portion of his corporate damage control. The preparations for the gala were a daily, quiet humiliation. In previous years, I ran these events. I was the one who managed the planners, who debated the merits of the halibut versus the fillet, who approved the floral arrangements. This year, I was a ghost at my own party. Naomi Hart was everywhere. She was at the hotel tasting, not as a guest, but as a director. I watched her send a plate back to the Michelin-starred chef, telling him the microgreens were not optimized for social media engagement. She was in Logan's office, sitting in my usual chair, reviewing the media teaser photos for the event. She was on conference calls I hadn't been invited to, discussing the step and repeat banner. She wasn't behaving like a media consultant. She was behaving like the hostess. She was the mistress of the house. One evening, I was leaving the Meridian after a final, humiliating walkthrough where Naomi had gently suggested my chosen linen color was a little dated. I passed two junior PR women huddled by the elevator bank. They were whispering, their heads close together, clutching their iPads. "Heard it straight from a paralegal in legal," one of them whispered, her voice sharp with gossip. "He's dumping the wife." "What? This week?" the other one hissed back, eyes wide. "And marrying the influencer before the gala." "No. Right after. They're just waiting to close the new round of funding. It's a complete image overhaul. New company, new wife, new—" They saw me. They both gasped, their faces instantly draining of color. They scattered like pigeons. I stood alone by the elevators, the rumor hanging in the air like cheap, heavy perfume, a complete image overhaul. I confronted him that night. He was in his massive walk-in closet, trying on a new tuxedo. The price tag, reading $4,500, was still on the sleeve. "Logan," I said, my voice tight, my reflection small in the mirror. "Your PR team is gossiping. They're saying you're planning to divorce me and marry Naomi." He didn't even turn around. He just adjusted a cufflink, admiring his own reflection. "Oh, for God's sake, Chloe, is that what this is? You're listening to 22-year-old assistants now. You're better than that." He finally turned, his face a mask of weary, practiced disappointment. It was a look he had perfected. "I am trying to save my company," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I am under a kind of stress you cannot possibly imagine. And I come home to this negative energy, this insecurity. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Chloe, this is why I'm tired." He walked past me, his shoulder barely brushing mine. "Just wear the dress, smile for the cameras, and trust me. For once, just trust me." "Can you do that?" It wasn't a question. It was a command. He was telling me to shut up. He was blaming me for my own replacement. And now, it's here, the night of the relaunch. I am standing by the grand entrance, wearing the silver-gray gown he demanded. I am beautiful. I am radiant. And I am silent. The air is thick with the smell of champagne and manufactured importance. I watch Logan work the room, but he's not working it with me. He's holding court near the media pit, the flashbulbs popping, and Naomi, in her white dress, is beside him. When the official event photographer asks for a shot, Logan pulls her to his side. Not me. I watch them pose. His hand is possessive, low on the small of her back. Her head is tilted up at him, her smile adoring, the perfect image of power and beauty. I am 10 feet away, smiling. The event manager, Jessica, a woman I hired 3 years ago, hurries over to me. Her face is flushed with a deep, painful embarrassment. She's clutching her clipboard. "Mrs. Ward, Chloe, I'm so sorry," she stammers, refusing to meet my eyes. "There seems to be a mix-up with the seating chart. Your seat. It's at table 3. Table 3, not the head table, not table 1, with the governor. Table 3, the table for important, but not essential, donors." I look over at the sprawling head table, at the single empty chair beside Logan. I see the elegant, cream-colored placeholder card. It doesn't say Chloe Stewart. It's blank. That's perfectly fine. Jessica, I say, and my voice is so calm it frightens even me. Thank you for letting me know. The lights dim. The MC, the same one from last year, steps into the spotlight. And now the man who makes Crown Harbor what it is, the visionary behind Ward Nexus Capital, Mr. Logan Ward. The applause is thunderous. The spotlight hits him as he walks onto the stage. He is radiating confidence. I feel it. The cold dread from the PR rumor. The nausea. He takes the microphone. He beams. Thank you, he booms, his voice filling the room. Thank you. We are all here tonight to celebrate the future, to celebrate a new chapter. There it is, a new chapter. My breath catches in my throat. He's not looking at me. He's looking into the crowd, at table 2, where Naomi is sitting, bathed in the glow of her own phone, probably live streaming. And in the spirit of new beginnings, Logan says, his voice thickening with that fake emotion, the one I've heard him use a dozen times in investor pitches. I want to share a very personal one. He reaches his hand down from the stage. Naomi stands. The spotlight snaps from Logan and follows her as she gracefully walks up the steps. She is wearing white. Of course she is. He pulls her to his side. His arm snakes around her waist. The flashbulbs erupt. Pop, pop, pop. They sound like gunfire. I'd like you all to meet Naomi, he projects, his voice triumphant. My new wife? The room dies. 300 people stop breathing. I can feel every eye in that ballroom pivot. A physical, sickening weight, swinging from the stage and landing directly on me, sitting alone at table 3. They are waiting. They are hungry. They are waiting for the explosion. They are waiting for the tears, the screaming, the satisfying, public destruction of the discarded wife. I am 14 years old again, standing in the kitchen in Maple Ridge. My father telling my mother not to put her hopes in me. I am the invisible one, the one who doesn't count, the one who is no trouble. But the humiliation doesn't paralyze me this time. It clarifies. It freezes my blood and sharpens my focus. The girl who read contract law in the library, the girl who built an armor of clauses, is still in here. I don't run. I don't cry. I stand up. I pick up my champagne flute from the table, and I walk toward the stage. The whispers stop instantly. The crowd is utterly, completely baffled. The victim is off script. I stop at the foot of the stage, right in the blinding white glare of the spotlight. I raise my glass. Congratulations, Logan, I say, my voice ringing out, amplified by the stunned, perfect silence. You always did love a dramatic reveal. He looks frozen. His smile is gone, replaced by a flicker of pure rage. This wasn't in his plan, but Naomi, she's a performer. She mistakes my calm for civilized surrender, for a European-style agreement. She beams, stepping forward, and extends her perfectly manicured hand, offering a handshake, a performance of no hard feelings for the cameras. I step up to her. I take her hand, and as I do, I lean in, as if for a social air kiss, a gesture of grace. The cameras flash, capturing the civilized moment the two wives, embracing. My clutch is in my left hand. Inside it is a single, folded document, a copy, not the original. As I lean in, I press the folded papers from my clutch into her waiting palm. It's a clean, sharp transfer, hidden by our bodies. She frowns, a tiny wrinkle appearing between her brows. Her hand closes around the papers. I lean in, my lips brushing her ear, my smile still radiant for the cameras. He loves contracts more than people, I whisper, my voice like sweet honey and crushed glass. He made me sign that when we got married. Read it tonight, and then ask yourself if you really want to keep the name Ward. Pay close attention to Section 4, Subsection B. I pull back. I give her one last, bright, meaningless smile. I turn, step off the stage, and walk, not run past table 3, past the open-mouthed guests, through the ballroom doors, and into the cool, quiet marble lobby. I don't look back. The ride down in the elevator is silent. The doorman, his face a mask of professionalism, opens the door for me. I slide onto the cold, familiar leather of the back seat of my limousine. The door closes with a heavy, satisfying thunk, sealing out the world. The car pulls away from the Meridian Crown, its glittering facade shrinking in the rearview mirror. My makeup is still perfect. My hair is immaculate. I am still the radiant prop. But my eyes are not the eyes of the woman who walked in tonight. I reach down and open the small, hidden compartment in the armrest, the one I had installed, the one Logan dismissed as paranoid. It's a small, digital safe. I punch in my code. It's not our anniversary. It's the date Grandma Eleanor died. The door clicks open. Inside, sitting alone, is the original, notarized, wet ink copy of my prenuptial agreement. I lift it out. The heavy, legal stock paper feels cold and powerful in my hands. I look at Logan's arrogant, sprawling signature next to my own small, precise one. All right, I think to myself. Turning the page to section 4, it's time to use this. The email arrived at 8:04 in the morning. It was not from Logan. It was from a senior partner at a law firm I had never heard of. A firm far more expensive and aggressive than Kingsley Rowe. The subject line was, Ward v. Ward Confidential Settlement Proposal. Dear Mrs. Ward, it began. In the interest of a swift and amicable dissolution, amicable, the word was a slap, after a public execution by spotlight. He wanted amicable. The email went on to outline a generously structured, one-time settlement. It was a lump sum that sounded large to a normal person, but was, as I knew from the ledgers I used to keep, less than the cost of his private jet's annual maintenance. It was a rounding error. It was an insult. And attached, a separate 5-page document, the non-disclosure agreement. It was a cage of impenetrable legalese. It wasn't just a gag order. It was a digital tomb. It forbade me from speaking about him, his business, his new relationship, our marriage, our finances, his shoe size, anything, to anyone, in perpetuity, on penalty of forfeiting the entire generous settlement and opening myself up to further damages. For the first 48 hours, I was in freefall. I stayed in the penthouse, which no longer felt like a home, but like a glass cage perched 30 stories above the real world. I unplugged the landlines. I took my phone and threw it in a desk drawer in the guest room, burying it under a stack of old stationery, but I could still hear it. A muffled, furious buzzing, a constant, angry vibration against the wood. It was the world, clawing to get in. Hundreds of messages, I was sure. Texts of pity, texts of morbid curiosity, texts from reporters. I drew the blackout curtains. The sprawling, sun-drenched apartment was plunged into an artificial night. I lay on the 1,000 thread count sheets, still wearing the sweatpants and t-shirt I'd put on the day before. The navy blue gala gown was still in a heap on the floor where I'd dropped it, a puddle of silver gray silk, like a casualty. The gossip sites, I knew, would be a feeding frenzy. Crown Harbor's flashiest divorce. Ward trades up. Inside the gala's most shocking moment. I didn't have to look to know. On the third day, the silence of the apartment was louder than the buzzing had been. I felt like I was suffocating. I needed to know. I retrieved the phone. The battery was at 2%. I plugged it in and, as it lit up, I opened a web browser. It took less than 5 seconds to find the article that changed everything. It wasn't on a major news site. It was on a popular, acidic local gossip blog called The Harbor Dish. The headline was, Traded in Why Logan Ward Upgraded His Life. The article itself was a masterpiece of strategic cruelty, clearly sourced from Logan's own PR team. It described me as the quiet, demure former paralegal who had never quite fit in with the dynamic pace of his new money empire. It painted me as a classic housewife, with no significant contributions of her own, who lived comfortably off Ward's genius. It went on. Sources close to the couple say the marriage had been a formality for years. With Chloe resistant to the demands of Logan's public life, Naomi Hart, a media-savvy founder in her own right, is seen as a much better fit for the Ward Nexus brand's new, dynamic, forward-thinking direction. I read the words. No significant contributions. Classic housewife. I didn't cry. The sadness that had been crushing my chest for 3 days evaporated, replaced by a sudden, white-hot, clarifying rage. It was pure, distilled fuel. It was the kitchen in Maple Ridge. It was my father. His voice thick with shame. She'll never earn anything big. Don't put your hopes there. They weren't just divorcing me. They were erasing me. They were liquidating my entire history, my work, my mind, the years I spent as his secret weapon, and recasting me as the no-trouble girl they could just sweep aside. I picked up the phone. It was at 9%. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call a friend. I called Avery Hale. She answered on the second ring, her voice exactly the same as it was 10 years ago. Avery Hale. Avery, I said. My voice was a hoarse croak, a beat of silence. I saw the news, she said. Her voice was not kind. It was not sympathetic. It was sharp. I've been wondering when you'd call. He's been busy. His lawyer. They sent an offer. It's low. And an NDA. Of course it is, she snapped. Good. At least now you finally see him for what he is. He's not your husband. Chloe, he's the opposing counsel. Now stop crying, are you crying? No, I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. Good. Don't. Anger is better. Anger is productive. Get out of that penthouse. Be at my office in 1 hour. And bring the original. Avery was a full partner now. Her office was smaller than my penthouse bathroom, but it was hers. It was chaotic, piled high with case files and legal aid binders, and it smelled like stale coffee and determination. I walked in wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap, and the same sweatpants I'd been in for 3 days. I looked like a celebrity hiding from rehab. I felt like a refugee. I handed her the file with the original prenup. She didn't offer me tea. She didn't say, I'm so sorry. She just said, sit, and pointed to a rickety guest chair. She spread the thick, heavy pages of the original agreement across her entire desk. For a full 5 minutes, the only sound in the office was the shing, shing, shing of her yellow highlighter pen. Well, she said finally, leaning back in her chair, his new lawyer is either an arrogant idiot, or, more likely, he's assuming you are an arrogant idiot. He's operating like this is a standard, amicable, no-fault divorce, where the wife is too emotionally distraught to read the fine print. She spun the document around so I could see it. It was glowing with fluorescent yellow. He conveniently forgot about Section 4, Subsection B, the infidelity clause, the one with the 10-year window. We're at 9.5 years, I whispered. I can count. Chloe, she said. He forgot about the fixed settlement sum, which, by my math, is roughly 5 times what his lawyer just offered you. He forgot the 20% kicker from the appreciated value of the Nexus Fund. And she tapped the page with her pen, her eyes glittering. He really forgot about Section 4, Subsection C, the part we added, which states that any attempt to fraudulently convey or transfer assets to a third party to avoid said obligation, like, say, setting up offshore trusts for a 25-year-old lifestyle vlogger, will be considered a material breach and will trigger an immediate default judgment. She picked up the settlement offer from Logan's lawyer, holding it between 2 fingers as if it were dirty. This is the interesting part, though, the NDA. It's a gag order, I said. It's a panic attack in legalese, Avery shot back. Look at the language. It's desperate. It's not just about personal matters or the details of the separation. It specifically and repeatedly forbids you from discussing any and all business operations, financial structures, or internal strategies of Ward Nexus Capital. Chloe, He's not terrified you'll talk about the affair. He staged the affair. He's terrified of what you, the former paralegal who used to review his term sheets, know about his money. The overheard conversation in the study. Cash flow is tight, high leverage, serious trouble. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just a midlife crisis. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a corporate cover-up, and I was the primary loose end. He locked me out, I said, the words coming fast. Weeks ago, changed the passwords to all the investment accounts. He can lock you out of the private accounts, Avery said, a slow, wolfish grin spreading across her face. But he can't lock you out of what's public. Ward Nexus is still a publicly traded company. He still has to file with the SEC. He's just making it pretty in the meantime. She gave me a name, not a high-powered corporate auditor, but a forensic accountant, a man named Peter Quinn, a quiet, gray-haired bulldog who worked out of a cramped, dusty office above a sandwich shop. I met him that afternoon. I paid his $5,000 retainer, not from the joint account, but from my own secret investment account, the one Logan didn't know existed, the one protected by my prenup. Mr. Quinn, I said, I need you to analyze Ward Nexus Capital's public filings for the last 24 months. Compare them to their quarterly press releases. Find the gap between the story they're telling and the numbers they're filing. He called me 2 days later. Mrs. Ward. It's, well, pretty is the word. He's capitalizing operational expenses that should be on the books as costs. He's recognizing projected revenue from contracts that haven't even been finalized, and he's using his SPVs, his special purpose vehicles, to hide leveraged debt. It's not technically illegal, not yet, but it's a house of cards. He's pumping the stock price to get that new round of funding. If he doesn't land it, I'd say the whole thing implodes in 6 months, maybe less. I hung up. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. I looked out over Crown Harbor, at the glittering glass and steel tower with the Ward Nexus logo at its peak. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the classic housewife with no contributions. I was the internal plaintiff. I was the one who had read the fine print. I was the only person in the world who had both the motive, the prenup, and the means, the financial truth. I went to my office. I pulled out the hard drives Avery had told me to make. I booted up my old laptop. I started a new file, a simple spreadsheet, a timeline, every email I still had, every calendar appointment, every receipt, every dinner I had documented with Naomi Hart for the charity, complete with dates and locations. Every time Logan was in Chicago, but his Amex receipts, which I still got, said Miami. I wasn't just building a divorce case, I was building an indictment. I sat down and drafted a new email, not to Logan, to his lawyer. It was one sentence. I will be declining your client's initial offer, which I am treating as a bad faith negotiation. I will send my own proposal after I have retained counsel and completed a full and thorough assessment of all marital assets and liabilities, both declared and undeclared. I copied Avery. I hit send. The following week, I had my first appointment with a therapist, Dr. Lena Hansen. She had kind eyes and a room that smelled like lavender. She pushed a box of tissues toward me as I sat down. I didn't take one. So, Chloe, she said, her voice a soft, gentle hum. You've been through a profound public trauma, a betrayal. Let's talk about how you're grieving the loss of this relationship. I looked at her kind, expectant face. I'm not here to grieve, doctor, I said, my voice clear and steady. I'm here to work. She looked surprised. I'm not sad about the marriage, I continued, leaning forward. I'm angry. And I'm about to do something very, very destructive to him. I am about to use the entire system he worships, the legal system, the financial system, to tear him down completely. I'm here because I need to learn how to stop feeling guilty about it before I've even begun. Peter Quinn, the forensic accountant, was worth every cent of his retainer. He wasn't just a bulldog. He was a bloodhound. He didn't just look at the public SEC filings. He dug into the arcane, dusty corners of corporate registries, cross-referencing shell corporations in Delaware with holding companies in the Cayman Islands. His second report, delivered a week later, was not a pretty picture. It was a horror story. "It's worse than I thought, Mrs. Ward," he said, his voice flat over the phone. He didn't do pleasantries. "He's not just juggling, he's built a pyramid of debt. He's using special purpose vehicles, SPVs, to acquire toxic assets and keep them off Ward Nexus's main balance sheet. He's using new investor money to pay the interest on the old debt. It's a classic, sophisticated shell game." I was following him. It was a familiar, if ugly, corporate structure. So he's hiding the debt. He's hiding it, yes, but the real problem is where he's hiding it. I've unraveled the ownership structure on 3 of the largest SPVs, the ones holding the most toxic, high-leverage debt. They're registered in Delaware under a corporate shield, which is standard. But, Mrs. Ward, you need to be prepared for this. Prepared for what? Peter? The name on the incorporation documents. The primary managing member for Nexus Opportunity Fund 2, Nexus Opportunity Fund 3, and Ward Holdings Alpha isn't Logan Ward. It's you. It's Chloe R. Stewart. The phone felt slippery in my hand. I sat down, hard, on the edge of my bed. "That's impossible. I've never seen those documents. I've never signed anything." "You probably signed a stack of routine tax filings or household incorporation papers about 4 or 5 years ago. Didn't you?" A junior associate from his law firm probably brought them over. I remembered it perfectly. A young man in a cheap suit, waiting patiently while I signed a thick stack of papers Logan had left for me, saying it was just some boring LLC setups for the estate plan. I had been busy. I had been trusting. I hadn't read the fine print, the one rule I swore I'd never break. "What does it mean?" I whispered. Quinn's voice was grim. "It means you are the legal owner of his most explosive, toxic debt. It means when this whole thing goes sideways, when the music stops, the SEC isn't just going to be looking at him, they're going to be looking at you. You're the name on the hook, Mrs. Ward. Legally, you're his co-conspirator." I hung up the phone. I was going to be sick. This wasn't a divorce. This was a setup, a frame. He was going to burn his entire empire to the ground and leave me standing in the ashes, holding the matches. The proof arrived 3 days later, in the most mundane way possible. An email. I still had my old email address. It was defunct, mostly, but still forwarded to a private, dummy account I'd set up years ago. I only checked it once a week for stray newsletters. But this was not a newsletter. A harried junior PR associate had clearly intended to forward an email chain to a new PR consultant. Instead, she had typed Chloe into the address bar. Chloe Stewart had auto-filled, instead of Chloe Smith, or whatever the new girl's name was, and she had hit send. The subject line was Narrative Strategy Ward VE, Ward Crisis Comms. The email chain was a strategic discussion between Logan's new lawyer, his chief of communications, and the head of his PR agency. My blood turned to ice as I read. "We need to pivot the narrative immediately," wrote the PR head. "The scorned wife angle is killing us. We need to preempt her. We need to paint her as the reason for the company's strategic realignment." Logan's lawyer had replied, "Agreed. We leak the narrative that she was the problem, a voracious spender, demanding a lifestyle that was unsustainable. We position Logan as the victim, a brilliant founder forced to take on aggressive risk simply to keep his high-maintenance wife happy. He was under duress, the Naomi angle. That was a symptom of the stress Chloe caused. A voracious spender, high maintenance, forced him to take on risk. I looked around the penthouse I had never redecorated. At the clothes in my closet I had mostly bought on sale. At the simple 10-year-old car I still drove because I thought his was too flashy. I thought about the secret investment account I had built, penny by penny, from the allowance I was supposed to be voraciously spending at spas and on jewelry. It was so perfectly diabolically cruel. It was the story my father had written for me. She'll never earn anything big. Now Logan was finishing the chapter she can't earn. She can only spend, and she'll destroy you with her need. This wasn't just about replacing me. He was going to use me as the legal and public scapegoat for his entire, catastrophic financial failure. He would walk away, the tragic, brilliant victim of his greedy wife, and I would be left to the SEC, the press, and the creditors. I picked up the phone and called Avery. I read her the email. I told her what Quinn had found. For the first time in her life, Avery Hale was silent. She was silent for a full 30 seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was not the voice of a lawyer. It was the voice of a general. "Right," she said, her voice a low, cold hum. "Change of plans. This isn't a divorce negotiation anymore. This is a war. Get your hard drives. Get your investment statements. Get Quinn's reports. Come to my office. Now." We spent the next 72 hours in her cramped, coffee-stained office, building what she called the counter-narrative. It was our war room. We had 2 whiteboards and a diet of stale pizza and black coffee. "He's running 2 plays," Avery said, scribbling on the board with a red marker. "Play 1, the public. He paints you as the greedy, spendthrift wife. Play 2, the feds. He makes you the co-owner of the debt, the fall guy. Our job is to blow up both plays before he can even get on the field." We built the Avery file, as she called it. Exhibit A, the prenup, our foundational document. Exhibit B, the PR email, proof of a conspiracy to commit defamation and libel. Exhibit C, my separate, personal investment statements, meticulous records, going back 9 years, showing every allowance deposit, every purchase of a non-Ward Nexus stock, every dollar I had earned on my own, proof that I was not a spender, but a sophisticated investor in my own right. Exhibit D, a sworn affidavit from me, detailing every instance Logan had locked me out of financial discussions, every time he had told me not to worry my pretty head about the business, proof that I had zero operational control. Exhibit I, a sworn affidavit from Peter Quinn, detailing the SPV structure, the dates of incorporation, and the fact that I was the named partner. "This," Avery said, tapping the stack of binders, "will stop his divorce case dead. It proves bad faith, it proves fraudulent conveyance, and it proves he's already violated the prenup by hiding assets. We can get your money. We can win." "But," I said, the word tasting like ash, "it doesn't stop the SEC. It doesn't stop the creditors. It doesn't stop the press from running with his high-maintenance wife story. This proves I'm innocent, but only after I've been charged." "He's still hiding the real money, isn't he?" Avery said. It wasn't a question. "The money he's actually siphoned out, not the debt." "The cash. Quinn hasn't found the exit account." "No," I said. "He hasn't." "Then we find it. It was me. In the end. Who found it? Not Quinn. Not Avery. Me. The girl who used to draft those documents." I went back to my hard drive, to the terabytes of household data I had copied. I wasn't looking for financial statements. I was looking for patterns. I found it buried in a file of travel invoices, an Amex wire confirmation from 2 years prior. It was a single $1 million transfer. It wasn't to a vendor. It wasn't to a bank. It was to a trust, managed by an obscure law firm in Switzerland. The wire memo was simple. Naomi Hart Trust Seating. My heart stopped. I cross-referenced the trust's legal name. Then I searched the travel invoices again, and again, and again. There were 8 transfers in total, over the last 2.5 years. Small amounts at first, then larger, a total of over $15 million, all to the same trust. A trust whose sole listed beneficiary was Naomi Hart. Naomi wasn't just the affair. She wasn't just the new wife. She was the exit plan. She was the vault. He was siphoning the last of the real cash out of the company, transferring it to her, an unrelated third party, before the whole house of cards collapsed. He would file for divorce, Let Ward Nexus go bankrupt. Let the creditors and the SEC swarm me, the co-owner of the debt, and he would walk away with Naomi, $15 million richer, clean as a whistle. To start again, I called Avery. I told her. This time, the silence was shorter. That, Avery said, her voice full of a cold, terrible awe, is a federal crime. That is wire fraud, and it's conspiracy to commit bankruptcy fraud. She proposed the boldest move yet. Forget the divorce hearing. Chloe, that's small claims court. We have a nuclear weapon now. She laid it out. We don't go to his lawyers. We don't go to a judge. We take this entire file, the prenup, the PR emails, the SPVs with your name, and now the wire transfers to the Naomi Trust, and we walk it straight into the U.S. Attorney's Office or the SEC. We become the confidential informant. We become the whistleblower. We give them Logan on a silver platter. We give them the crime, the method, and the laundered money. We get you full immunity, and we become the primary witness in their case against him. I was speechless. She was talking about destroying him, not just divorcing him, destroying him, sending him to prison. Avery, I don't want to be part of a national scandal, I whispered. I don't want my face on the news, testifying. You're already going to be in a national scandal. Chloe, she retorted, but you get to choose the headline. Do you want to be Chloe Ward, greedy housewife, indicted in financial collapse? Or do you want to be Chloe Stewart, whistleblower, brings down corrupt CEO? You're already in the story. You just get to decide if you're the victim or the hero. I looked at the file, the prenup, the emails, the wire transfers, my entire marriage, reduced to a stack of evidence. The thought of Logan and that vlogger, sipping cocktails on a beach in a non-extradition country, living off the $15 million he'd stolen, while my name and my life were reduced to ashes. Avery leaned across the desk, her eyes locking on mine. You've spent your whole life thinking you're the outsider. Chloe, the girl from Maple Ridge, the paralegal in the corner, but you're not. You're the only person in the world who is sitting on both things that matter, the prenup and the truth. The only question left is, how far are you willing to use them? My rejection of his insulting offer, followed by Avery's polite but firm letter, clearly rattled him. Logan Ward was not a man who enjoyed being told no, even politely. The whispers Peter Quinn had started about Ward Nexus's creative accounting must have been growing louder. He was a man under pressure, and he was running out of time. His new, high-priced law firm went on the offensive. They flooded Avery's inbox with letters marked urgent and final offer. They were trying to manufacture a deadline, to create a sense of panic. In the interest of closing this painful chapter, one letter read, Mr. Ward is prepared to increase his generous offer by 20%. He must, however, have this finalized by the end of the fiscal quarter, so he can focus on the stability of his company and its many employees. It was a barely veiled threat. Settle now, or I'll drive the company off a cliff, and you'll get nothing. Avery and I crafted our response. We played directly into the narrative he had written for me. I was the emotional, fragile, classic housewife he believed me to be. Avery sent back a carefully worded masterpiece of feigned weakness. My client, Chloe Stewart, remains in a state of profound emotional shock from the public nature of these events. She is not, at this time, emotionally or mentally capable of analyzing complex asset divisions. Her primary goal is not financial gain, but a desire for privacy and peace. She is amenable to a final, in-person meeting to resolve this, but she implores all parties to approach this with the sensitivity it deserves. We used all the right words. Shock, peace, sensitivity. We made me sound like a tired, heartbroken woman who just wanted it all to be over. Logan's lawyer took the bait so hard, he nearly ripped the rod out of our hands. He replied within an hour, his tone shifting from aggressive to condescendingly paternal. He scheduled a final signing meeting at his boardroom for the following Tuesday. This was it. They were confident they were bringing a lamb to the slaughter, ready to be sheared. Meanwhile, Avery's office had become a war room. We weren't preparing for a signing. We were preparing for a prosecution. We assembled 5 identical leather-bound binders. Each was professionally embossed in gold leaf. Stewart v. Ward Confidential Brief. Inside each was the complete, weaponized truth, organized by tabs. Tab A. The original, notarized prenuptial agreement, with Section 4, subsection B, highlighted in a sickening, fluorescent yellow. Tab B. The complete email history from our original negotiation, proving his lawyers had seen, debated, and ultimately conceded every word. Tab C. The full forensic analysis from Peter Quinn, detailing the SPVs, the hidden leverage, and the incorporation documents that bore my forged signature. Tab D. The gala. Printouts of the Harbor Dish articles, the social media photos, the video captures of the moment he called her his new wife, irrefutable, public proof of infidelity. Tab E. The internal PR email, the high-maintenance wife narrative. Proof of a conspiracy to commit defamation. He's a cornered animal. Chloe, Avery said, 2 nights before the meeting, as we were collating the pages. And a cornered animal is dangerous. He's already shown he'll commit fraud to protect himself. What's to stop him from doing something? Worse, you're not just a legal problem for him anymore. You're a witness. The next day, I went to another law firm, a discreet, quiet estate planning office on the other side of town, run by a man who had been Avery's mentor in law school. I set up a simple trust. I placed a 6th, identical binder, along with a new, encrypted external hard drive, into a safe deposit box managed by this firm. The instructions were simple, notarized, and ironclad. If I, Chloe Stewart, failed to make a check-in call with a specific passphrase by 6 p.m. every single day, the firm was legally obligated to bypass Avery and deliver the sealed binder and hard drive directly to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, the head of enforcement at the SEC, and the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS. It was my dead man's switch. Logan didn't know it, but my continued silence was now his only protection. I had moved out of the penthouse. It was a fishbowl, a glass cage, and I couldn't breathe there. I was in a long-term corporate suite at a hotel across town, checked in under my grandmother's maiden name. The hotel had a dark, absurdly expensive steakhouse in the lobby. I was there, in a high-backed corner booth, having a late, tense dinner with Peter Quinn to review his final affidavit. And then I heard her voice, that breathy, insincere, influencer coo. I don't care what he says. Logan, I am not overreacting. My blood went cold. I motioned for Peter to be silent. They were in the very next booth. It was so dark. They hadn't seen me. They were arguing in low, furious whispers. The Harbor Dish is posting rumors about Ward Nexus, Naomi hissed. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was a blade. Not about us, about the debt, about the SEC. People are saying the company is a house of cards. What if this all goes away? What about the money you promised me? What about my trust? The trust is fine, Logan growled, his voice tight with irritation. It's separate. It's your money. I told you. I have this handled. The only thing that matters right now is closing the deal with Chloe. Once she signs that NDA, she is neutralized. We are clean. She's agreed to the meeting. She's broken. Naomi, she just wants her little check and to disappear. How do you know? Naomi pushed, her voice getting whiny and sharp. What if she knows about the prenup? Logan laughed. It was a short, arrogant, ugly bark that hit me right in the chest. What about the prenup? I had the best lawyers in the city write it. It is an ironclad fortress for me. It gives her nothing. She has no claim on anything. She signed her rights away just to be Mrs. Logan Ward. She has nothing to stand on. She will sign. I sat there, frozen, my hand gripping my water glass. He had forgotten. He had actually, truly forgotten. in his arrogance, in his narrative of his own genius. He had forgotten the 2-week war we had waged. He had forgotten the concessions. He had forgotten my clauses. He was walking into that meeting armed with a lie he had told himself so many times. He now believed it was the truth. It was the single greatest mistake he would ever make. I thought that was the end. I thought I had all the fuel I needed. But there was one more piece to come. The night before the meeting, I was in my hotel suite, going over my notes, my own binders spread across the coffee table. An email popped up in my inbox. The sender was a random string of letters from a disposable email service. The subject line was one line, "For your protection." There was one attachment, a PDF. I opened it. It was another internal PR document, a strategy memo, but this one was newer. It was darker. It was titled, Phase 2 Containment Strategy. If Stuart Chloe refuses to sign the NDA at the final meeting, it read, we move immediately to the secondary narrative. Narrative the unstable wife. We have procured sworn statements from 2 former household staff members attesting to a history of erratic behavior and emotional instability. We will leak a narrative of her struggle with prescription pills, sedatives, anxiolytics. We will position her as unreliable, vindictive, and mentally unwell. This will serve to discredit any wild financial claims she might make to the press or authorities as the delusions of a woman scorned. My hands were shaking. They weren't just going to call me a classic housewife. They were going to paint me as insane, as a drug addict. They were going to burn my entire life, my reputation, my very sanity, to the ground. The anonymous sender had to be someone from the inside, the junior PR girl, a secretary who had been asked to type it, someone who finally saw what he was and couldn't live with it, any last, lingering scrap of mercy I had, any tiny thread of guilt about what I was about to do to the man I once loved, evaporated. It was gone. There was nothing left but ice. I printed the document. This was tab G, the final piece of my case. I slid it into the back of all 5 binders. I stood in front of the hotel room mirror. I didn't practice crying. I practiced my lines. I practiced the words I would say, the exact level tone of my voice. I was no longer a party in a divorce. I was a lawyer. Preparing for my closing argument, at 10 p.m., my phone rang. The screen flashed, Logan Ward. It was the first time he had called me directly since the gala. My heart hammered, a stupid, reflexive betrayal. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Chloe, his voice. It was the old voice. The one from our first dates, the one from the car in the rain. Warm, deep, a little tired, sincere. It was an instrument he was playing perfectly. Logan, my voice was flat. Chloe, I'm glad we're doing this tomorrow, he said, a performance of profound relief. This whole thing, it got so ugly. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You know, I cared about you. I did. I just want this to be amicable. I want us to walk away and remember the good years. I just want to keep the dignity for both of us. Dignity. After he had his team draft a plan to call me a drug addict, he was trying one last time, the charming, reasonable guy. He was checking to see if I was still the no-trouble girl from Maple Ridge. He was making sure I would be quiet tomorrow and just sign the paper. I was silent for a long moment. I listened to him breathe on the line, performing his sincerity. You'll get what you want tomorrow. Logan, I said, my voice as cold and clear as the glass in his penthouse. You'll get an agreement. It's just not going to be the one you think. I hung up the phone before he could reply. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I did not pull out a sad victim dress. I pulled out a suit, a dark charcoal gray wool suit with sharp, unforgiving shoulders and a razor-thin pinstripe. I paired it with a simple, cream-colored silk blouse. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe, professional bun. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was not Mrs. Logan Ward. She was not the classic housewife. She wasn't even Chloe from Maple Ridge, I thought, as I picked up my briefcase, the one containing binder number 1. Today, I am not going to meet my ex-husband. I'm going to meet a business partner who tried to defraud me. And I'm bringing along the one lawyer he has underestimated since the day he met me. The boardroom at Logan's new law firm was a glass box on the 45th floor, designed to make you feel like a god or an insect. There was no press, but the air was heavy, static, like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. At the head of the impossibly long, reflective black table sat Logan. To his right, Naomi, looking nervous, her fingers twisting a diamond bracelet. To his left, his lead attorney, a man named Jennings, who looked like he was carved from expensive, unforgiving wood. Avery and I sat on the opposite side. A court stenographer sat silently in the corner. Jennings began. He slid a thin, bound document across the table. His voice was a smooth, patronizing baritone. "Mrs. Ward," he began, not looking at me, but at the document. "We are all here to put this unpleasantness behind us. In that spirit, Mr. Ward is offering a very generous final settlement, a one-time cash payment of $500,000, and the title, free and clear, to the suburban property in West Harbor. A very comfortable new start." He tapped the last page. "In exchange, you will sign a comprehensive, permanent non-disclosure agreement," and he added, as if it were an afterthought. "This addendum, which is standard, confirming your non-involvement and releasing you from any and all liability related to the financial operations of Ward Nexus Capital." I listened. I did not interrupt. The trap was so beautiful, so simple. He wasn't offering me money. He was offering me a release from the very liability he had spent 5 years strapping to my back. He was offering me a clean escape from the SPVs in exchange for all the money, the truth, and my signature. When he finished, the room was silent. Everyone looked at me. The broken, fragile wife. "Chloe," Logan prompted, his voice laced with false gentleness. "It's a very fair offer. It's time to just sign and move on." I looked up. I smiled. Just a small, polite smile. "Mr. Jennings, I appreciate the effort your team has put into drafting this, but it appears to be based on a fundamental and very costly false assumption." I reached into my briefcase and retrieved binder number 1. I placed it on the black table. The sound was a heavy, definitive thud that echoed in the glass room. "You've clearly based this on the version of our prenuptial agreement that Mr. Ward remembers," I said, my voice clear and level. "I, however, am working from the one we both actually signed." I opened the binder. I turned it around. "This is the original, notarized copy, and I'd like to draw your attention to Section 4, Subsection B." Logan's face, which had been relaxed and confident, began to tighten. His lawyer, Jennings, looked confused. "That's not—" "I'll read it aloud for the stenographer," I said, my voice cutting through his. "In the event of a divorce filing precipitated by an act of public infidelity by Mr. Ward, occurring within 10 years of the marriage date, we are at 9.5 years. Mrs. Stewart is entitled to a fixed settlement of $10 million. Logan's face went from tan to a pale, grayish-white. "Oh, but that's not all," I continued, tracing the line with my finger. "She is also entitled to 20% of the appreciated value of the Ward Nexus Primary Investment Fund, and of course, subsection C. Any attempt to fraudulently convey or transfer marital or corporate assets to a third party in the 24 months preceding a divorce filing, in an effort to avoid this obligation, shall be considered a material breach. All such transferred assets will be subject to a full and immediate clawback." Naomi, who had been looking bored, suddenly sat bolt upright. Her eyes darted from the paper to Logan. She understood. She was the third party. Her $15 million Swiss trust was the fraudulent conveyance. "Logan," she whispered, her voice sharp, stripped of its breathy charm. "What is she talking about, a clawback? You told me you handled this. You told me the prenup gave her nothing." "Quiet, Naomi," Logan snarled. "Jennings." his face pale, stammered. This is a fabrication. We have the executed copy. Do you? I asked. I reached into the binder and pulled out tab B. Then you must also have these, the complete email records of the 2-week negotiation between myself, Avery Hale, and your predecessor at Kingsley and Rowe, detailing every single concession, red line, and finally, the acceptance of these exact terms by Mr. Ward. It is all certified. It is all admissible. Logan was staring at me, his eyes no longer full of pity, but of pure, unadulterated hatred. But Mr. Jennings, I said, that's just the divorce. I'm afraid we have a much bigger problem. I reached into my briefcase again. I pulled out binder number 2. I placed it on the table next to the first. A second thud. This, I said, is the real reason we're here. This is the liability you were so generously offering to release me from. This is the file on the 3 special-purpose vehicles registered in my name, without my knowledge or consent. I looked directly at Logan. I am not interested in your settlement offer, because I have already filed a formal complaint. As of 9 o'clock this morning, a full summary of Ward Nexus's financial irregularities, including the hidden leverage, the toxic debt, and the fraudulent accounting practices, was delivered to the appropriate oversight committee at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Jennings looked like he was going to faint. Logan actually half rose from his chair. You what? That complaint, I continued, my voice steady, includes my sworn, notarized affidavit stating that I had zero operational, financial, or strategic control of those SPVs. It includes the email chains where Mr. Ward explicitly told me not to worry my pretty head about the business. It proves I was not a co-conspirator. It proves I was the first victim of his fraud. I reached into the binder one last time and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the Phase 2 Containment Strategy memo. And finally, this, an internal document from your PR team, detailing a strategy to paint me as a mentally unstable drug addict. I have filed this as proof of a conspiracy to commit defamation and libel, designed to silence a whistleblower. My case is quite solid. The boardroom was dead silent. The only sound was the quiet click-click-click of the stenographer's keyboard. Naomi was staring at Logan, her face a mask of pure terror. You framed her, she whispered. And you put my money, our money, in my name. Before Logan could answer, there was a sharp, official rap on the glass boardroom door. Avery, who had not said a word, simply said, "Come in." The door opened. 2 men and 1 woman, all in dark, conservative suits, entered the room. The lead agent, a woman with cold, intelligent eyes, held up a badge. "Agent Morales, Securities and Exchange Commission," she said, her voice commanding the room. "We have a summons for Mr. Logan Ward regarding an active investigation into Ward Nexus Capital." She turned to the stenographer. "Ma'am, you'll need to provide a full transcript of this meeting, Logan's world." His entire glass and steel empire shattered in that instant. He turned to me, his face a mask of desperate, pleading rage. Chloe, stop this. We can fix this. Call them off. I'll double the offer. I'll give you 30%. Just retract the report. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can blame Jennings." I stood up. I began to calmly place my binders back into my briefcase. I looked at him, at this small, terrified man who had tried to erase me. "You taught me a valuable lesson all those years ago. Logan, in a conference room, just like this one, you taught me to always read the fine print. You taught me that the person who controls the language controls the outcome. You taught me the power of a signature." I snapped the briefcase shut. "Today, I'm just applying that lesson, by the letter of the law, by your own signature." I watched, with a cold, clear detachment, as Naomi Hart silently, deliberately, pulled her hand away from Logan's arm. She slid her chair back, her eyes fixed on him as if he were a stranger, a leper. She finally understood that her rich husband was about to be worth nothing, and she was tied to his fraud. "Mr. Ward," Agent Morales said, "we'll need you to surrender your passport." The meeting was over. It had dissolved. Avery and I turned. We walked to the glass door. We didn't run. We didn't look back. I didn't need to declare victory. The sound of Naomi's quiet, panicked sobs, and Logan's stunned, sputtering silence was enough. As the heavy glass door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their glass box with the consequences of their actions. I walked down the long marble hallway. My footsteps were steady, and they were my own. I was still holding the original prenup in my hand, the piece of paper that had once been the symbol of my powerlessness, the cage he had built for me. It was now the testament, the proof, and the key. It was the first time in my life I had written my own ending. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share this with you all. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.